Hi everyone, Julie Wood here, and I want to congratulate you for joining me on this webinar today. Here, I just want to give a little introduction of myself. I'm a functional health coach and I specialize in nutrition medicine and functional diagnostic nutrition. What a mouthful. And what I do is provide a step-by-step system to investigate the underlying causes of any problem that you have, any dis-ease, any illness, any discomfort, and identify the healing opportunities. So while the goal of our programs are to provide individualized behavior and lifestyle, we want to restore function and resolve those unwanted health conditions permanently. So how did I get into this? Well, I've always been a healer, and I studied as a nurse and midwife, and I went on to do occupational health and safety. And then after my husband had a brain injury, I looked at all the different ways of providing him the support he needed and how I could give him optimal life. So that's sort of how I got into nutrition medicine. And all the things that I've studied over time made me realize that I don't need to just offer nutrition advice, or I don't need to offer hypnotherapy, or I don't need to just offer healing services or biofeedback, but I can combine them all into one system, which is called functional health. Because as humans, we want to maintain health and vitality through the orchestration and complexity of our cells, our tissues, our organs, our systems, the fluids that we have in our system, the gases we produce, our biochemistry and energy, which runs on a real set of instructions, or that innate intelligence that we have within every cell. And all these activities and all these biochemical reactions and the inherent programs they run on is called metabolism. And if our metabolism's working properly, or if our cells are working properly, we have a vital reserve. And that vital reserve helps us when we get caught in tough times. So when we're functioning properly, the metabolic processes work in harmony and maintain like homeostasis and balance in our body. And while there's some flexibility in the operating ranges of the processes, any loss of homeostasis in one area or one system can cascade into other areas and eventually produce the symptoms that you experience. And often the symptoms are far removed from the actual system that's failing. So we're like a hologram. So we might have a pain in our little finger, but actually we've got a problem with our heart. And we've all heard of those people that they just had an ache in their shoulder or a pain in their little finger, and the next minute they had this heart attack, which has obviously been building up for a long time. So those hidden stresses or dysfunctions or malfunctions, if they're left unchecked and untreated and not corrected, will cascade downstream into other areas. And so as one dysfunction builds upon another, depending on your individual weak links in your metabolism, all manner of disease and symptoms can occur. So by observing that the exact same symptom or cluster of symptoms can be found in many people, even though the originating malfunction or imbalance has occurred in an entirely different area or different system in the body. Reed Davis, the actual founder of the functional diagnostic nutrition programs, coined the phrase the metabolic chaos cascade to explain this phenomenon. And likewise, if you look at it, the same originating imbalance or dysfunction may cascade through an entirely different set of weak links or vital voids in metabolism from one person to another, and thus produce entirely different sets of symptoms. Your health complaints may stem from one or a few imbalances or dysfunctions or malfunctions in your body, not directly connected to the symptoms you're feeling. So by properly investigating and assessing the underlying causes, you can stop using band-aids that give only temporary relief and actually heal what is creating your symptoms instead. So we're not symptom chasing. We're looking for the root cause of your problem. And we're looking for identifying healing opportunities. And functional diagnostic nutrition or functional health coaching provides the keys to actually help you get well and stay well naturally. And my business is called Naturally Healthy because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give people opportunities naturally to allow their bodies to heal themselves. Now, sometimes that's not always possible and we need support. And today we're talking about adrenal fatigue and how it can impact your life. So most doctors will tell you there's no such thing as burnout and there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue, and we'll get into that later. But the term adrenal fatigue was formulated in 1998 by a naturopathic doctor in the US called James Wilson. He had a PhD. And his research found that this syndrome, this adrenal fatigue syndrome, was explained as a collection of related symptoms caused by insufficient adrenal gland function. In other words, when your adrenal glands operate inadequately, complications arise and adrenal fatigue syndrome can develop. And usually the onset of adrenal fatigue is attributed to prolonged stress and chronic infections due to hormonal changes, immune responses, and metabolic changes. So on the next slide, we're going to look at those factors that affect the adrenals. Now, how many of these factors do you have in your life? Is there fear or negative attitudes and beliefs? Don't forget, it's much easier to be negative than it is to be positive. Our mind automatically goes to the negative. You might have financial pressures. Someone that you loved might have died or been in a serious accident, or you might all sorts of life issues, lost your job, run out of money, gone bankrupt. And so there's all that emotional and psychological stress. There's our body issues. We might have infections that don't heal, might have asthma or chronic diseases that need prescription drugs. We might have allergies. We might be a smoker. We might have insomnia. We might do too much or not enough. If you're an A-type personality, you're always doing. And if you've got that sort of mind that doesn't turn off, it's really hard to relax. And then you get tired, so then you're going to look for stimulants, and that's where our diet comes in. Those poor eating habits that we have, that craving for sugar, caffeine, coffee, those V drinks or those energy drinks. So when you first start to have problems with your adrenals, you may not present any physical signs of illness, but generally we feel like we can't think, we're thinking through cotton wool, we're fatigued, and we have those strong food cravings. And sleep doesn't solve this exhaustion. In fact, most people push through their tiredness and then they get another burst of energy, which is the cortisol in the adrenals, pumping out more cortisol, more adrenaline, and wakes you up, and then you can't go to sleep. And so then you're looking for sugar, coffee, you might eat a bucket of ice cream, you might, want to eat cakes or lots of bread or have lots of coffees, as I said, and other stimulants to sustain your energy throughout the day. And unfortunately, this is counterproductive for adrenal fatigue. So we'll be going over more detail on how these habits affect this complicated phenomenon throughout this presentation. So what did you say? What things do you do, or issues do you have, or what's your diet like? And are you someone, have you done the test? I put up a link on Facebook about doing that test for your adrenals to see if you've got any signs of fatigue and at what level it is. So how did you go with doing that? So let's actually next look at our adrenals and where are they and what do they do. So our adrenal glands are two glands located above the kidneys and are made of two different parts. Both are responsible for hormone production, but how they do it differs greatly. So let's have a look. So the adrenal glands, which are also called the supraadrenal glands, are small triangular glands located on top of both kidneys. The adrenal gland is made of two parts. The outer region, which is called the adrenal cortex, and the inner region, which is called the adrenal medulla. The adrenal glands work interactively with the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, where the hypothalamus produces corticotropin-releasing hormones, which stimulate the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland in turn produces corticotropin hormones, which stimulate the adrenal glands to produce corticosteroid hormones. So as a little exercise now, I want you to make a fist and just at the back of your, take your fist round to your back and just at the base of your ribs, make two fists there. And that's where your kidneys and your adrenals sit. So how did you go? So let's take a closer look. Now the adrenal cortex, as I said, is the outer portion of the adrenal gland, and the hormones secreted there have an effect on the body's metabolism, on chemicals in the blood, and on certain body characteristics. The medulla is the inner section of the adrenal gland, and the medulla also produces non-essential hormones, or ones that are not vital for life. But that doesn't mean that this part of the adrenals isn't important. In fact, the adrenal medulla is incredibly valuable for dealing with physical and emotional stress and contributes to our fight or flight response of our parasympathetic nervous system. And the most notable chemical messenger produced in this part of the adrenals is adrenaline. And this hormone increases the heart rate and the force of heart contractions, facilitates your blood flow to the muscles and brain, and causes relaxation of smooth muscles, and helps with the conversion of glycogen to glucose in the liver, plus other activities. Norepinephrine, which is also called noradrenaline, also has little effect on smooth muscle or metabolic processes and cardiac output, but has a strong vasoconstrictive effect, thus increasing your blood pressure because it's tightening and closing up your veins and your arteries. And the adrenal glands also produce the sex hormones estrogen and progesterone, as well as various neurotransmitters such as dopamine. And so when the proper production of these hormones are disrupted, adrenal fatigue can continue. So on the next slide, as you look here, you can see all the things that the adrenals affect. So the cortex, again, excretes corticosteroids and other hormones directly into the bloodstreams. The hormones produced by the cortex include mineralocorticoid hormones, hydrocortisone hormone, which is known as cortisol, controls the body's use of fats, proteins and carbs. And corticosterone, this hormone together with the hydrocortisone hormones, suppresses inflammatory reactions in the body and also affects the immune system. Aldosterone hormone inhibits the level of sodium excreted into the urine, so it maintains blood volume and blood pressure. And the androgenic steroids, the androgen hormone, have minimal effect on the development of male characteristics. But again, we need them. And the medulla, as I said, are not vital for life, are non-essential hormones. And as I said, that doesn't mean they're not important. They are valuable for dealing with physical and emotional stress and contribute to our flight or fight response of our parasympathetic nervous system. And as I said before, the most notable chemical messenger produced in this part of the adrenals is adrenaline. And the hormone increases the heart rate and force of heart contractions, facilitates blood flow to the muscles and brain, and causes relaxation of smooth muscles, and converts the glycogen to glucose in the liver, and produces our sex hormones and our neurotransmitters such as dopamine. So it's quite complex. So it affects our muscles, and over time it can cause muscle wasting. It affects the reabsorption of our bone matrix. In our liver, of course, it's converting the glycogen to glucose. Look at the fat deposits, how our body can break it down. In our lymph nodes, initially increases our antibodies and then eventually decreases them. And in our kidneys, you're looking at, first of all, an increase of urine production, and then eventually potassium loss and sodium retention, which is your edema. Initially, you've got increase of neural excitability in your brain, which is your brain can't turn off. And initially it has an anti-inflammatory action, and then that breaks down and we have slow healing. And it also affects the eosinophils and neutrophils in our blood. Wow, pretty intense. So what's the symptoms of this adrenal fatigue? How many of you have that persistent fatigue? Do you have trouble waking up in the morning? Do your energy levels go up and down throughout the day? How about your ability to cope with stress? Did you used to be really, really good at handling stress and it never bothered you? But now, every time you get a little bit stressed, you find that your energy levels just drop away. What about food cravings? Do you really want salt? You know, you're looking for those potato chips that are salted. Or are you looking for something sweet to boost your energy up? What about your immune system? Are you having trouble healing? Do you have dark circles under your eyes? Do you have unexplained body aches and joint pains? Do you feel depressed or anxious or sad for no reason that you can think of? Life's going really well, but you're not. And how about your blood pressure? If you stand up quickly, do you feel lightheaded? Do you get any numbness or in your fingers and toes or poor circulation? And do you have any weight gain and fluid retention? And the other thing is decreased libido. So your sex drive's gone. The last thing you want to do is have sex with anybody. So how many of those symptoms do you have? Just put it under this webinar and let's talk about it later. But what can you do? And isn't stress a good thing for you? So let's talk about stress. Stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline are really a good thing. When released appropriately, they provide mental clarity, physical stress, and overall brain and muscle efficiency. that can be seen sometimes as being superhuman. And when you think about it, if someone has an accident, or for example, if someone's on the train station and all of a sudden their leg falls down between the station and the train, people get superhuman strength, push the train back and take the person out of between the train and the station. Everyone gets this adrenaline rush, this superhuman strength where they can actually push the train back so that the person can get their leg out. So what is this adrenaline rush? It really refers to your body appropriately responding to stress by activating its fight or flight mechanism, so it can be used to propel you out of danger, help someone in a pressing situation, or conquer a fearful situation. So when we were hunter-gatherers, we had to be able to either fight whatever it was that was going to attack us, whether that's, like a tiger or some dinosaur thing or whatever, or we had to run for our lives. And the trouble is today, we're in a fight or flight situation because we're in survival mode in a different way. We're in survival mode because we're at work. We've got the pressures of work. We've got the stress of the boss. We've got tasks to complete in a certain time frame. And we can't run away and there's no one to fight. So when our body uploads and unloads the adrenaline when we're not taking in a tasking situation, such as sitting at a desk, then our body is not using its stress hormones correctly, and that's when we start to have problems. We get sick and stressed. So chronic stress suppresses adrenal function as the adrenal glands become unable to continue producing the cortisol needed to recover from stress. So what does that mean? That means that we're sitting at our desk stressed day in, day out. We're not fighting the issue or whatever the problem is, so we're not having fisticuffs where we need to burn off that adrenaline and cortisol, and we're not running away because we have to sit at our desk. So, and stress can be caused by a number of things, not only of the work we're doing and sitting in front of the computer. It can be unresolved biomedical dysfunctions like infections, hormonal imbalances, particularly for women as they near 35, where the hormone production starts to decrease anyway. So that can be aggravating to the problem. And, some women, when they get to menopause, have all sorts of issues because their body is cycling through all these emotions that they don't know how to control, and they become the witch or the bitch from hell, which is totally unlike what they've ever been before. And that is really stressful because they hate it and don't know what to do with it, and you hate it because you're on the receiving end. It could be a nutrient-poor diet over time. Could be shift work causing a lack of good sleep, not sleeping in the right circadian rhythms. Could be stimulants such as caffeine, coffee. Can be your work-life balance. If you're someone that works 80 hours a week, what relaxation or downtime do you have to recover? It can be lack of all the exercise that you need to get rid of that build-up of cortisol. Can be overtraining physically. If you're an athlete, you might be training 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and eventually that just becomes too much for the body. It could be a physical or emotional trauma that you've had that creates long-term problems that you can't address properly, and it takes a long time to get over. And as I said for my husband, he was in a motorbike accident, he had a brain injury, and it took a lot of work to get him and and support his body back to something that was optimal for him and his condition. So that's what we're looking at. So the body's response to stress includes a surge of cortisol, a boost of energy, an increase in blood sugar, a lagged immune function, and the breakdown of stored protein and carbs. So that starts to mean that you break down your muscle, because that's where you store your protein. And as you can tell, this is not ideal when not in immediate danger, as it leaves us sustainable to complications like insulin resistance, decreased immunity, and muscle wasting. Plus, the other thing that often gets confused with adrenal dysfunction is thyroid. And there's a huge connection between adrenal and thyroid function. So let's talk about the adrenal thyroid connection next. So the rise and inevitable drop of stress hormones impacts the thyroid by slowing thyroid production and the conversion of thyroid hormones to their active and usable forms. And often if you go to the doctor with the symptoms of fatigue, depression, weight gain, muscle aches and pains, brain fog and low libido, the doctors will often say that you've got a thyroid issue and you have hypothyroidism. So the two conditions can be easily confused because the symptoms are pretty similar or the same. And the two glands are seen to work together due to their collective roles in supplying the essential hormones throughout the body. In fact, it's not uncommon for those suffering with thyroid dysfunction first to also have weakened adrenals. So let's take a look a little bit deeper in the uprise of thyroid dysfunction. It's so incredibly common. If you think about 80% of women are complaining of those symptoms. And when they get tested, it's undetected because it's suboptimal. So it's still often within the right range, but the patient still has an imbalance. Now, most doctors now will test the TSH level, the thyroid stimulating hormone, and they usually will test for T4 and T3. But if they don't, they're missing out on what the results are telling you. So the most comprehensive thyroid testing includes measurement of the T4 and T3, plus the reverse T3 and reverse T4, which gives you a better idea of how the conversion of TSH is into T4 and T3 and whether it's actually circulating around the body. The other test that also should be done is the sex hormone binding globulin test, leptin levels and tissue levels if they do a test on your thyroid, and they take a little bit of tissue and test it. And the other thing to look at is the basal metabolic rate. Without looking at all of these factors in thyroid function, the prescribed treatment that the doctor orders may be unfit for the patient. So if you're given thyroxine or another synthetic hormone for your hypothyroidism, many women still experience the fatigue. So they may want to, or anybody if they're still experiencing symptoms, want to revisit the testing and ask for adrenal function testing. But there is no formal in the medical model adrenal fatigue test. And that's where the functional health testing becomes crucial for an accurate and comprehensive assessment. So when you think about it, people with thyroid issues are complaining of fatigue, weight gain, they might have insulin resistance, they might have depression, they might have other signs and symptoms that are very similar to the adrenal fatigue. So it's important then that both areas perhaps get tested. And the functional lab testing that's done can look at all those things. And the basal metabolic rate, often you can look at taking your temperature every morning, first thing in the morning when you wake up, before you've done anything. And that sort of gives you an idea of your basal metabolic rate. But there's other methods to do as well. And the other thing that I also use is biofeedback to look specifically to if there's an energetic imbalance in any of these areas. So let's talk about functional diagnosis. I introduced it to you before, and let me just explain a little bit more about the functional health model. So functional health really moves away from disease and treatment specific models, where all you do is manage the symptoms. You're not actually looking for the root cause or providing assistance to the body to start to heal itself. So functional health relies on the body's innate intelligence. So we know now that the DNA has its own intelligence, and we call it that innate, the innate intelligence that's already programmed into our bodies. And we have a vital reserve. As I said, when everything's running properly, we have this vital reserve and ability to change and adapt and for the body to allow healing to itself. Functional health also relies on behaviour modifications and natural therapies. So it's working on everything in a non-specific manner, removing interference, restoring vitality, and returning the body to health and balance. Now, when you worked in health and the medical system and you use alternative or complementary therapies, you know that perhaps the thing that the person wants treated most is the last thing that gets resolved. And so, as a practitioner, when you talk to your clients or your patients, then you're advising them of that. You're helping to coach them. So functional health practitioners don't medicate, we educate, as we know symptoms are the result of an imbalance or dysfunction in the body. So we're filling the gap between chasing symptoms. In other words, we're eliminating the cycle of trial and error by being your own personal health detective, someone who identifies the hidden causes of disease and looks for the healing opportunities available to you. So functional health practitioners take the signs of adrenal fatigue very seriously, being that this disorder can be both a cause and a result from imbalances within the body. So as I said before, the things that we're looking for are fatigue, thyroid imbalance, unexplained weight changes, low blood pressure or high blood pressure, unstable blood sugar, hair loss, blurred vision, infertility, loss of libido. And so we're using, as I said, functional lab testing to identify those malfunctions and those healing opportunities. So the most common diagnostic tool for adrenal testing is a cortisol saliva test. So however, there are plenty of other ways to test for adrenal fatigue, such as blood and urine, testing for adrenal corticotropic hormone in a challenge test, doing the comprehensive thyroid testing, doing a cortisol DHEA ratio, doing neurotransmitter testing, doing a postural blood pressure test, iris contraction test, and getting people to do a metabolic assessment profile. And also, as I said before, I put a link on Facebook in one of my posts to go and do a questionnaire, which also will help the assessment. So the metabolic assessment profiling and the adrenal testing profile helps you to understand what's going on. So often we have to have that information from various different tests conducted multiple times and to make tracking and for you to track all your symptoms and make it a priority. So after testing, we then correlate the results of the hidden internal stresses and dysfunctions with your most common health complaints. And we then use drugless protocols and behaviour requirements to support the body's innate healing ability to coach up your vital reserve and to coach down that metabolic chaos that I talked about before. So really what we're doing is helping you adopt a self-care model based on behaviour change. We run the tests, finding the hidden stresses and dysfunctions, so we're the detective, and we're also looking for the healing opportunities, not just based on symptoms and not just treating the test results, because it's not a lack of a drug that you have, but it's a dysfunction hidden in the body, generally due to stress, as we saw in slide 4. So, what about the adrenal fatigue? So I've talked about all the different things that we do to look at it and the symptoms that you might have. So what are the stages? There's 4 stages of adrenal fatigue. And as we go through the stages, the symptoms increase in frequency and severity through them. And so we'll go through each stage one at a time. So the first stage is our alarm reaction. And the alarm reaction is pretty normal and everything goes back to normal. But if we keep having lots of little alarm reactions, then we move into stage 2, the resistance response. So let's start looking at them again. Stage 1 is alarm reaction. Stage 2 is the resistance response. Stage 3 is adrenal exhaustion. And stage 4 is adrenal failure. So now let's look at each phase in detail, starting with stage 1. So the first stage of adrenal fatigue is often called the alarm reaction or the fight or flight response. It is characterized by those high cortisol levels. And at this point, the body's it's giving us the body's immediate reaction to a stressor. And the body initiates a stress response to overpower the stressor and begin the production and release of cortisol. So when this happens, there's very little physical or physiological dysfunction that you can notice. Fatigue is usually considered mild, and may not sustain throughout the entire day. So you might be tired when you wake up, you don't feel like you've slept, you have some breakfast, and your energy level picks up for a while, and then it goes down, and then goes up again after lunch, and then it goes down about 3 o'clock. So as I said, the sleep patterns are disturbed. You have an uptake of caffeine, sugar and carbs at that point, just to keep yourself with enough energy to get through the day. So usually you're feeling wired but tired. In fact, most of us enter this stage of adrenal fatigue many, many times in our lives. And so we get over it though. We've got the vital reserve to go back to normal. We've got the innate intelligence within us to go back to what would be normal. So if you were to get a lab test during this stage, you'd see an elevation of adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, DHEA and insulin. So that's stage 1. So when you think about it, how many times have you been in that stage where you start to feel wired and tired, you're on edge? So now let's look at the resistance response, which is stage 2. And this is where the adrenals begin to lose their ability to keep up with the body's demand for cortisol. And so during this stage, your fatigue becomes much more noticeable and extends beyond the morning, early afternoon into the evening. And so the body needs more rest than usual to recover, but you rarely feel refreshed when you wake up in the morning or when you have a nana nap or anything. In fact, you probably feel worse. So often you have infections, insomnia, irritability, and anxiety are all the other things that become much more common when you're in the resistance phase of adrenal fatigue. And so this is where you start to feel like you need help. So often people go to the doctors and they get their thyroid tested and still they feel like terrible. And really, when their hormones are tested, such as DHEA and testosterone, they are starting to drop significantly. And so there's substantial drops in those hormones, and that's in exchange for the continual cortisol production. So when we go into stage 2, this can last for a couple of months up to several years, depending on how we attend to it. Whether we address the root causes of it, what the stresses were, whether it was a diet, whether it was a biochemical issue, whether it was emotional or physical, psychological. So depending how we attempt to reduce the stresses or whether we actually do anything is how long the symptoms can last for or how long this phase lasts for rather than just the symptoms. So then we move into stage 3, which is adrenal exhaustion. And really at this point, instead of your cortisol levels being really high, they start to be dropping significantly and they're not coming back to within that normal sustainable range. So the adrenal glands are basically becoming less effective, and the body's ever-increasing need for adrenal hormones remains unchanged though, because the stress is still present and hasn't been addressed. So stage 3 is really where the body recognises the decline in the cortisol output and focus on the conserving of its energy for survival. So in order to do this, the body begins to slow down and it starts breaking down existing muscle tissue for energy, so people become sarcopenic, which is really the body burning up its own muscle tissue to provide enough energy for the body to keep going. So one of the things that happens when you get to this point is you get chronic fatigue syndrome. And you can't exercise because you've got reduced exercise tolerance. You have a much longer recovery time from anything that you do. The brain fog is really bad because you think that you're thinking all right, but you generally find that you're not. You get depressed, so depression's really increased. You perhaps get increased infections, but not everybody does at this point. There's weight gain, there's lack of sex drive, and there's less productivity during the day. And there's also an increased need to rest. Now I know because I've been in this stage 3, and it took me a long time to recover from it and get back to a more realistic like stage 1. Because of the increased stress, the chronic stress that I have and had. So if it's not treated at this point, the body further loses its balance and homeostasis, and it loses the ability to maintain stable and to function properly through change. So luckily, it's uncommon for people to progress beyond this burnout to the 4th stage of adrenal fatigue progression. So at this point, much of the body's stress hormones, sex hormones, and neurotransmitters are very low, representing the crash after suffering from stress for a long period of time. So as I used to say, my hormones are down in my toes and they don't get past my knees. And so that feeling of fatigue, the chronic fatigue, the aches and pains, the brain fog, you you can't walk very far without getting exhausted. And if people tell you should exercise more because it'll help you, you can't, because you just don't have the ability to do that. And you don't want to stay here. This is when we really need to address what's going on in your life and going on in your body, and looking at your biochemistry and being that detector, that detective for those hidden stresses and those hidden dysfunctions. Because the next stage is stage 4. And as I mentioned, excuse me, it's uncommon to enter this stage of adrenal failure, but it's the most dangerous and the most important to recognize. Because eventually, if untreated or if we don't address the issues, the adrenals become completely exhausted. And this severe advancement of adrenal fatigue can manifest very similarly to the clinical adrenal insufficiency that doctors talk about, which is Addison's disease. And this is where you get sudden pain in the lower back, the legs, and the abdomen. You get vomiting, diarrhea, and other digestive distress. You get severe dehydration, your blood pressure goes down under your toes, I think. You lose consciousness, and there's a high risk of cardiovascular collapse. So in other words, these symptoms are obvious, but there's still a chance of misdiagnosis. And so it's incredibly important to recognize the signs and see a trusted physician. Because once adrenal fatigue enters this stage, the chance of it becoming fatal is serious, because it leads to death. And it's really a relevant concern to have. So I can't stress this enough, that you need to address what's going on with you and your life before you get to this point. So let's look at a graph of the progression of adrenal fatigue. So in areas 1 and 2, you start to see how your symptoms start to get worse. You get low blood sugar, you get insomnia, you get irritability and anxiety. And then once you get down to number 3, 4, 5, you're starting to get right down into the nearing a crash. Because if you look at number 6 and number 7, number 6 is where you're getting to adrenal exhaustion. And you might get some symptom help by taking medication for your thyroid, or you might have antidepressants and sleeping tablets so you get some symptomatic relief. And then over time, the medication has to be increased to keep you at the same energy level. And then when you look at number 9, you're on the edge and you start to go downhill again. And so number 10 is where you have got adrenal fatigue problems, and you're at the 3rd stage of adrenal failure, fatigue, I should say, not failure. Because when you get to number 14 or 13, then you're starting to have, from the slightest bit of stress, you're starting to be on the edge, and then you're going down and starting to look at extreme fatigue. And then number 15 is where you're in adrenal failure, and there's sort of no coming back from that, or a very long time to come back from that. So as you can see, it's a really, if you like, slow progression, and it can be months or years to get to that level 13, but we don't want to go there, do we? So what's the solution? So what can you do to reverse adrenal fatigue? The earlier you recognize your symptoms, the better. And some of the things that you can do to reverse it is change your diet, depending what you're eating. You can take adrenal supporting supplements and herbs. You can reduce the stress in your life. Sometimes that's not always possible, but you have to find a coping mechanism. You need to minimize exercise and increase rest. You need to sort yourself with a regular sleep schedule. You need to detoxify your body and your life. And sometimes the detox includes people in your life. You need adequate hydration, and you need to heal existing infections, and you need to practice meditation or do Tai Chi or yoga, some way that you can get the body into a state of relaxation. So let's talk about the diet, the dietary changes, the things that help support you. So if you want to stress your adrenals more, then eat a diet full of processed grains, vegetable oils and sugars, which is our standard Australian diet or the standard American diet. Conversely, if you want to treat and support your adrenals, you need a nutrient-rich diet, which includes healthy fats, fiber, protein, which helps support adrenal health and aids in the adrenal fatigue recovery, I should say. So in particular, these foods are especially impactful in the fight against adrenal fatigue. And so the things that you want are healthy fats, such as coconut oil, coconut milk, avocado, olives, olive oil, nuts, seeds, grass-fed butter, fatty fish, and grass-fed meats. We want vegetables to provide a variety of nutrients to nourish the whole body, including the adrenals. We want fermented foods for their probiotics. We want protein specifically in the morning. And it's recommended that people consume approximately 40 grams of protein in the morning to provide support to the adrenals throughout the day. So in most cases of adrenal fatigue, you want to add a little bit of salt because that seems to benefit those who add it to their diet. So unless you're one of the rare people with adrenal fatigue and high blood pressure, add enough salt to your food to make it taste all right, but not oversalt it. So use sea salt, Himalayan salt, or Celtic salt, because these kinds of salt contain the valuable nutrients that your body's after. And some of the symptoms of adrenal fatigue are actually caused by the body's need for salt because of the changes in the aldosterone. So you want to avoid caffeine drinks. You want to avoid sugar and sweeteners. You want to avoid starchy carbs. You want to like potatoes, rice. You want to avoid processed foods, particularly processed meats. You want to avoid hydrogenated oils like safflower, canola. So you want to avoid bananas, raisins, dates, figs, oranges, and grapefruit, because fruits contain a significant amount of fructose and potassium, which is a detrimental combination for those with exhausted adrenals. However, it is preferable that any fruit that you do eat is organically grown, and you want to avoid eating any fruit in the morning. That's why we're saying you need to consume approximately 40 grams of protein in the morning to help support your adrenals and to manage your blood sugars. Because grass-fed butter, fatty fish, grass-fed meats are incredible tools to stabilize your blood sugar. So let's look at 9 easy rules to follow for supporting your adrenals. So rule number 1 is to eat a variety of whole natural foods, preferably organic. You want to eat a combination of healthy fats, proteins, carbs with every meal that you eat. You want to eat lots of fresh vegetables, especially the bright coloured ones. You want to salt your food. And as I said, Himalayan, Celtic or sea salt is best. And you just do it to get a pleasant taste. You want to eat mainly whole grains as your source of carbs. And if you're a vegetarian, to get the complete proteins, you want to combine any grains that you have with legumes, that's beans, or you want to combine legumes with seeds or nuts to form a complete protein. You need to avoid fruit in the morning. That's really important because you don't want to push up blood sugar levels that aren't going to be sustainable. And you want to mix 1 to 2 tablespoons of fresh oils, that's cold pressed olive, grapeseed, flaxseed, chia seed, macadamia, sesame, avocado, coconut, into your grains, your vegetables and your meats daily. So if you're having salads, you can make up a beautiful little salad dressing with the oils, a bit of vinegar, a bit of lemon juice and fresh herbs. And so one of the things I haven't got there is you need to eat soon after you wake up. And if you have adrenal fatigue, it's really important that you eat before 10 a.m. And this is vital in helping to replenish the waning stored blood sugar that you have after your previous night's energy needs. So often people find they wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning because their blood sugar levels are low. And so that causes an increase in cortisol, which means that when you wake up in the morning, you're not hungry. And so people don't want to eat before 10 o'clock. But if you have adrenal fatigue or any of the symptoms, it's really important that you replenish your blood sugar levels first thing in the morning when you wake up. And you need to add protein with that, with the carbs and the fats to balance your blood sugar levels. You need to eat an early lunch, preferably before noon, and it's much better than a late lunch because your body quickly uses up the morning nourishment, is ready for more. So between 11 and 11:30, if you have any adrenal fatigue, is usually the best time for lunch. And should also then eat a nutritious snack between 2 and 3 in the afternoon to sustain yourself for the cortisol dip that typically occurs between 3 and 4. And so then your evening meal should be between 5 and 6 p.m. Excuse me. And a few bites of a high quality snack before bed can help you get through any sleep disturbances, which is caused again by the big drop in your blood sugar levels. So what is the role of blood sugar? Well, the increased levels of cortisol that result from the early stages of adrenal fatigue can also raise your blood sugar very quickly. And this upsets our body's balancing act, resulting in a dump of insulin. And this insulin orders our cells to take in as much sugar as possible to regain safe blood glucose levels. And insulin also signals our bodies to store extra glucose for later use. However, if our diets continue to provide more sugar than our body ever needs to use, we gain weight. There's inflammation and health complications can develop. You start to get insulin resistance. You start to get abdominal obesity. And it's really important to address blood sugar stability when healing your adrenal fatigue because it has a pivotal role in your energy production. So what about the deficiencies that we have? So vitamins and minerals are really necessary for the body's natural processes and for hormone production and utilization. So a few of the most important vitamins and minerals to supplement with include sodium, which you're going to get from salts, the natural salts, the Celtic sea salt, the sea salt, the Himalayan pink salt. And they're really important because, as I said before, aldosterone is a hormone responsible for salt regulation, and this is reduced by your adrenal fatigue. Vitamin C is not only is it a powerful antioxidant because it works to protect the body against free radicals, it's also an essential building block for adrenal gland recovery. The B vitamins, B5, B6 and B12, are specifically involved in cell metabolism, energy production and fatigue reduction. Vitamin D is especially important for adrenal fatigue as it increases the enzyme needed for the production of adrenal hormones. So when the body is in a stressed state, the body must choose between replenished the lost vitamin D or producing cortisol. And obviously cortisol is chosen because it's for survival, furthering the adrenal fatigue that the cycle continues. So when you think about it, you need that 20 minutes of sun. But if you've got adrenal fatigue, you also need to make sure you supplement with vitamin D. And perhaps you need more than the recommended daily intake. So energy levels are also maintained by magnesium. So often magnesium deficiency results in fatigue, depression, and many of the other fatigue symptoms that you have, especially the muscle aches and pains, waking up during the night, getting those irritable legs. So also we want to look at the probiotics because they improve your digestion, your immunity, they aid in vitamin absorption and hormone production. So it's really important to follow your health practitioner's guidelines specific for you for proper supplementation due to deficiencies, severities, and the stage of your adrenal fatigue. So next we want to look at sleep. Sleep is so important because sleep dysfunction is so closely related to your fatigue. And due to the body's natural schedule of cortisol secretion, our levels naturally rise and fall throughout the entire day. And adrenaline and cortisol both increase alertness and affect sleep schedules in a number of ways. And as I said, often if you are fatigued, you'll push through things because your adrenaline and cortisol in a cyclic way come back up, and so then you can't go to sleep. You're staying awake and you're lying there all night, wide awake, but really tired. So you might have trouble falling asleep because you're stayed up too late. You might have trouble staying asleep, or you might have trouble with both. And then you have trouble waking up in the morning because you feel so terrible. So you really need stress relief, and you need a proper sleep routine. And that's creating a sleep schedule for going to sleep and waking up. It requires you to rest when you feel tired as much as you can. And you really want to sleep between 8 to 10 hours a day. And you want to avoid staying up too late or being too stimulated close to bedtime. So you really need to set yourself a practice of turning off the TV, listening to music, going to sleep in a dark room is the best thing. You should be going to sleep in a blackened out room. And then you need to have the early morning sun to stimulate your melatonin and melanin production. So what about the stress management? Because the obvious problem around adrenal fatigue is the stresses. It's those hidden stresses or those known stresses that affect us and get us into this state. So there's no surprise that stress relief is one of the most important factors in an optimal recovery. So how do you do that? How do you overcome the stress? What if you're in a situation where you're under a lot of stress all the time and it's a lifestyle thing, you're looking after for someone, you're caring for someone, so there's not going to be really a availability to get rid of it. So what else do you do? And as I said before, do Tai Chi, do yoga, use some essential oils, do meditation. Breathe deeply is one of the easiest and simplest and cheapest ways. So what you want to do is sit quietly, take a big deep breath through your nose, breathing in deeply, and just do it with me now. Holding it and having a big breath out. And repeating again, breathing in deeply, holding, breathing out. One more time, breathing in deeply, breathing in, filling up those lungs, holding it, and then breathing out through your mouth. By doing those 3 deep breaths, it allows your body to start relaxing, and you'll notice it. So spend time with people you care about. Journal. Keep a gratitude journal. Write down the things that you're grateful for that day. Maybe only just one thing, but write 5 things. Write down what you've done today that you may be able to do better next time. Or write down something that you've improved upon over today, that you haven't, bashed yourself up over because you didn't complete a job, or congratulate yourself for when you do feel a little bit better with your energy, but be mindful that you're not going to overdo it, because that's what tends to happen. Listen to some enjoyable music, relax with a good book, go for a walk down the beach, put your feet in the water, walk along the sand barefoot, drink some tea, go outdoors, get a massage, join a relaxation group, go for a swim, do something that you can do to help relax you. What is it that you do to relax you? How do you combat your stress? Tell me what things that you do while we look at this slide, which is giving us the general rules for adrenal fatigue. So stop pushing yourself. Don't go to bed past 11 o'clock. Get rid of those energy suckers. The people, the places, and the thing that make you feel worse or discourage your recovery. As I said, stop being harsh on yourself or negative with yourself. Stop beating yourself up. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Accept responsibility for who you are and how you act. And so don't be a victim. Change that thinking. Avoid the foods that you're addicted to. Because if you're addicted to a food or a drink or something, it often means that you have a sensitivity or an allergy to it. So avoid those things. If a food makes you feel worse, clouds your thinking, or pulls you down in any way, then stop eating or drinking it or whatever. No matter how much or how good you crave them or how good they taste, then don't. And you might say, oh, culturally, I'm Chinese or I'm Indian or whatever that you are. that I've been eating this since I was a child, or, I was brought up on this stuff. But culturally, genetically, you're not adapted to have it. So if you want to eat a lot of it, say ice cream, for example, or drink a lot of milk, and you're not genetically ready to do that because it takes, 20,000 years for the genes to change and adapt. Well, what they found is, depending on your genes, sometimes you're not ready to do that yet. Culturally, in this world, at this point in time, it still means that you have an allergy or a sensitivity to it. So you've got to stop it. Never eat starchy carbs like breads and pastas and potatoes by themselves, because you're just adding to your condition. So what's something else that you can have? So this is adrenal recovery soup. And so if you try this soup, because it's been proved successful and helpful in adrenal support, it helps to alkalize the body. And it was developed by Dolores S. Downey, and the soup's called Taz, and it's from her Balancing Body Chemistry with Nutrition seminars. So keep a list of what foods make you feel bad and avoid them. Try having a glass of water in the morning with half to a teaspoon of the salt dissolved in it, but don't do this if you're exercising. If you have fruit, have something with salt before or after the fruit and chew it very well. And as I said, combine the starchy carbs, the protein, the fats at every meal, and eat an abundance of whole foods. Don't get pre-prepared meals or protein shakes or anything unless you've been advised to. So take the power and responsibility of your health into your own hands and make whatever lifestyle changes you need to make to regain your health. Laugh several times a day, and the other thing is take 1 gram of vitamin C with 200 milligrams of magnesium and pantothenic acid at about 2 o'clock every day with a small snack to avoid the 3 to 4 p.m. low. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation today on your adrenals and how stress impacts them. And I'm really passionate about sharing this topic with people who are eager to transform their lives and to achieve that optimal health, who want to work with someone who's a detective to find the hidden stresses in their body and the dysfunctions and the biochemical issues, because I'm really here to support you. And that's what I do. And I really hope that you took lots of notes and, pardon me, that you're ready to implement some of those things that you've learnt today. So here's some of the resources that I've used to get this presentation ready. And there's a whole lot of them. If you would like a copy, then please let me know. So thanks again, and please share the most valuable piece of information you learn today from Don't Let Adrenal Fatigue Impact Your Life with your friends, with your neighbours, with anyone that you think needs your information or needs this information. And if you feel like you need support on this journey, then please contact me to ask for help. And we hope that Don't Let Adrenal Fatigue Impact Your Life exceeded your expectations, and that you really feel well equipped with the knowledge, resources and tools to finally combat your adrenal fatigue and feel your best. So please visit my website, www.naturallyhealthy.com.au, and I'll put it below. And if you have any questions, then just contact me and PM me, and I'll get back to you and assist you as best I can. So thanks a lot. I've really enjoyed giving you this presentation, and I look forward to working more with you. Thank you.